All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this section of the AWS SysOps Admin Associate Challenge. Today, we're going to be talking on AWS monitoring, audit, and performance, and we'll dwell mainly on 3 services. We're going to talk about AWS Amazon CloudWatch, Amazon CloudTrail, and AWS Config. So these are the 3 services we'll be looking at in relation to the performance, audit, and monitoring of your AWS account and applications. So right away, let's start with CloudWatch. So Amazon CloudWatch is a service that monitors the performance of your AWS resources and applications. So it monitors the performance of all the resources and applications that run on your AWS account in real time. So what it does is it collects and tracks metrics for all the AWS services. And you can access CloudWatch from the console or through the command line. You can also use CloudWatch APIs as well as AWS SDKs. So as we already mentioned, it collects and tracks metrics. So what are metrics? So a metric is basically a variable or anything you want to measure and monitor for your resource or application. You can either use default metrics or you define the metrics. So you define what particularly you want to monitor about a particular service or a particular application that you're running in your AWS environment. An example of a metric is CPU utilization. You can also check for the RAM, which is the memory, and so on. So the behavior of the metric, the behavior of that variable that you're monitoring is directly proportional to how your service or your application is behaving. So if, for example, if you see that your CPU utilization is 95%, it's telling you that your EC2 instance, for example, the CPU utilization of that instance is that percentage, and so you can easily troubleshoot. So a metric will tell you how the instance is working and what to troubleshoot about it. So metrics belong to namespaces. Oh, am I still sharing?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Metrics belong to namespaces, and a namespace is just like a container for metrics, like a folder that contains all the variables that you want to monitor. And the variables or the metrics in each namespace are completely isolated for the metrics in another namespace. So you can have namespaces for the different services or different applications. Like you can have a namespace for EC2, you can have a namespace for DynamoDB, for RDB, and you can have a namespace for any application that you're running. And each metrics has dimensions. So I'll look at dimensions as a contributor to the unique identifier of the metrics. What is the metric particularly monitored? A unique identifier in the sense that it tells you, it uniquely identifies that variable. Maybe it locates it in the particular service or the application. Like for an EC2, an identifier could be the instance ID or the environment in which the instance has been launched or so. And in AWS, you can have up to 30 dimensions per metric. So metrics also have timestamps. Timestamps tell you, or is a measure of how far to the back or how far to the future you want your metrics to monitor. So it's like telling your metrics to give you data for the past 1 week or maybe the future 2 weeks or so. And as I already mentioned, You can either use default metrics or default variables which have been set for you by AWS, or you can customize your metrics. And that takes us to custom metrics. So for custom metrics, you are able to customize a metrics or a particular variable that you want to monitor for your service or application. And to do that, you're supposed to use the API call put metric data on the command line interface. And you'll be able to specify the namespace, the dimension of the metric, the resolution, that is how frequent the metric gives you data. And a metric can either belong to a standard resolution where you have data every 60 seconds, or it's a high resolution metric where it can have data every 1, 5, 10, 30 seconds, but it's at a higher cost and you have to pay more. And when you're customizing a metric, you also have the option to customize the timestamp. So you can be able to accept data points 2 weeks in the past and 2 hours in the future. Okay, so let's move now to CloudWatch dashboards. So a dashboard is like a graphical representation of your metrics. So it's an easy way for you to access and monitor your resources in a single view. It gives you a graphical representation of how the metric is behaving, or in turn, how your service or application is behaving. So it's an operational playbook that provides guidance for team members during operational events about how to respond to specific incidents. Like if we're working on a website, it's easier just to go to the dashboard of an EC2 instance and the CloudWatch dashboard for the instance that has been set up, because you have to set up the dashboard depending on the metrics that you want to easily access, and it'll be easy for you to see how the instance is functioning from the dashboard. So dashboards are global and can be shared across accounts as well. So you can also create a dashboard from the console, the CLI, and you can share it with people or persons who do not have AWS accounts. So pricing for dashboards, you have up to 3 dashboards for free, and in each dashboard you can include up to 50 metrics per dashboard. So as I mentioned, you are the one to define what your dashboard displays, so you choose the metrics it should display. For each dashboard you can have up to 50 metrics, and 3 of those for free, but afterwards you have to pay $3 per dashboard per month. Okay. So let's move to CloudWatch logs. So a log, as the term implies, is like, how should I say, a log is a form of keeping the metrics, like a way to store all the application metrics, like you have a logbook in real life. So a CloudWatch log store all the application metrics in AWS. And in CloudWatch logs, you can differentiate the logs by putting them in different log groups and streams. The different log groups should normally be the name of the application or service. Like I have a log group for EC2, and in the streams will be the particular metric it is monitoring for that service or application. And you have the option on the console to decide whether your log stays forever, it never expires, or you can choose the expiry date between 1 or 10 years, 1 day to 10 years. And by default, all AWS logs are encrypted. So what do you do with your logs? When you've collected all that information about the service, you have the option to analyze them. So you can send them to Amazon S3, you can export them to S3, you can export them to Kinesis data streams, to Lambda or OpenSearch. From S3, you have the option to analyze it using Athena. From data streams, you can send them to data firehose and analyze them. From AWS Lambda, you can trigger a particular action in response to the data that Lambda has received. So you also have the option to query your logs. Like querying your logs is trying to find a defined data from the logs. So that is done using CloudWatch Logs Insights. You can query, for example, the most recent logs. You can find out the logs that include a specific IP address and so on. Then we have CloudWatch Log subscriptions. As I already mentioned, when you have from CloudWatch Logs, you can send your logs to S3, but that is a process that takes about over 12 hours for the complete export to be possible. So what CloudWatch Log subscription does is that it helps for you to be able to export your data in near real time or real time to services like Amazon S3. So, and it also gives you the ability to aggregate your logs. So with CloudWatch Log subscriptions, when you're subscribed, you can aggregate logs from different accounts into a common store like Amazon S3. But to be able to do that, you need to put policies in place and IAM rules to allow CloudWatch from a particular account to be able to access the logs from another account. As we can see on this diagram, due to CloudWatch subscription, you can have logs from account A here in a different region, account B in a different region, account C in a different region, all thanks to the fact that these accounts are using CloudWatch subscriptions. They are all sent to a common destination, which is Kinesis data streams. We can then be sent to files and then to S3 in near real time. But if you're sending it direct to S3, as we already mentioned, without CloudWatch subscriptions, it takes much more time. As I'm going forward, please, if anyone has a question, feel free to stop me and ask. Okay, let's then look at CloudWatch alarms. So an alarm basically is a notification, just like the alarm in your phone. It is used to trigger, CloudWatch alarms is used to trigger notifications for any metric. So you define what the alarm should trigger. You define when the alarm should be triggered. Yeah, let me say so. So an alarm can be triggered for a single metric or a group of metrics, and that is composite alarms. If it is triggered for a group of metrics, it is a composite alarm, but you have simple alarms that trigger notifications for a single metric. So you have 3 different alarm states. You have the OK state, which means the alarm is okay, it's not an alarm. It has not triggered any notification. You have the insufficient data state, which means CloudWatch hasn't collected enough information to assess whether or not it needs to trigger a notification. And then you have the alarm state, when it has monitored and found that there is a problem, and so it triggers a notification. And you can always determine the period for which CloudWatch should monitor before triggering an alarm. For example, I think with EC2, every 5 minutes, you have data from CloudWatch. So you can determine what period or how long CloudWatch should monitor before deciding whether to trigger an alarm or not. And you also determine the statistic. If, for example, you're talking about the CPU utilization, the statistics could be average CPU utilization. So maybe say if the average CPU utilization for your instance is 50%, CloudWatch should trigger an alarm. An alarm which sends a notification to S3, and if your email address has been configured on S3, you receive a direct email and you'll be able to troubleshoot. So you can have average, you can have minimum, maximum, a sum, and all of those. And as I mentioned, you can trigger alarms for single metrics, or you can also have composite alarms. So a composite alarm is an alarm that is triggered when CloudWatch how do I say, when CloudWatch monitors different alarms. So it uses the alarm states for different alarms to be able to decide whether a composite alarm is in either of these three states. As we can see on the diagram here, you have an EC2 instance. One of the metrics is CPU. So you can set an alarm just for CPU utilization. That is going to be a simple alarm. You can set another alarm to monitor the IOPS, but now a composite alarm is going to be monitoring both this CPU utilization and IOPS, and you can define it. You can say CloudWatch alarm should only trigger notifications if, for example, your CPU utilization alarm and your IOPS are in the alarm state, or maybe if just CPU utilization is in the alarm state and IOPS is not. So you determine it, flexibility. So what are the alarm targets? When CloudWatch alarms trigger notification, what does it do? For EC2, for the instance, for example, CloudWatch has a direct effect or a direct activity that it can do on an instance. It can either stop the instance, it terminates it, it reboots the instance, or it can recover the instance. CloudWatch is also able to trigger auto-scaling action. So when a notification is sent to SNS, you can, from SNS, forward also that notification. From SNS, you can link it with AWS Lambda. That is if it's not having a direct action on an instance, for example. From SNS, you can integrate the notification to trigger a Lambda action to do pretty much anything on any service. So Lambda can run code and fix a particular thing depending on what the alarm notification is. And in the case of EC2 instance, when your instance is being recovered, I think this is an important point. When the instance is being recovered, you know that when you stop and start an instance, for example, the IP changes, but if it's rather recovered, the instance status the system, it stays with the same IP address. It stays, it has the same metadata. The placement group does not change. And yeah, that is it. I'm trying to look at the question from the chat. I'll look at it later. So for EC2 instance again, CloudWatch has two checks that it performs on the instance. It can perform a system check, that is, it is checking the performance of the underlying hardware on which the instance sits. That is, how should I say, the hypervisor, the hardware per se. And it also performs the instance check, which is the application that sits in the instance. So usually when you launch your instance, if you're vigilant, maybe we'll launch it later and see, you always see on the instance or the EC2 console, two on two checks. So these are the two checks that CloudWatch performs on an instance. And okay, if you're in a testing environment and you've set an alarm for a particular metric, there's a way to test the alarm. Because you usually set an alarm in an environment that doesn't just trigger the alarm. So you can use the set alarm state command in the command line to test the alarm and see if it works properly. Okay. Then we have another feature of CloudWatch known as CloudWatch Synthetic Scannery. So synthetic scannery gives you the ability to configure a script, which can either be in Python or Node.js. So this script monitors your APIs, your URLs, your websites, your applications, and the script can be scheduled to run on a regular basis, or you can manually trigger it to run. So it monitors your services, your APIs, your websites and applications, and it monitors them for the availability of the endpoints of your website, for example, the latency of the endpoints, and it stores some data and also takes screenshots of the user interface of. So it's like it helps you to test your website basically, and gives you information of how the website is functioning with respect to availability, latency, and so on. And as I mentioned, you can configure it to run on a regular basis, or you can trigger it maybe in a test environment to see the information that it gives you. And in case there is an error, because you define what the script should monitor for. So in the script, you define what they should monitor for. And in case it finds an error with respect to that script, it can trigger an alarm on CloudWatch alarms. So these are the various, we also have various, how shall I say, features of CloudWatch Synthetic Scannery that it monitors for. It can monitor for the heartbeat of your application, the API, any broken links, the visual monitoring where you can take screenshots. It can also record every activity that you do on CloudWatch Synthetic Scannery, and it also monitors for the GUI. Okay. So now we have CloudWatch Events. That was formerly known as CloudWatch Events, but now it's known as Events Bridge. So what does this feature of CloudWatch do? So CloudWatch Events helps you to react to events that are happening within your AWS account. So it helps you to react to any activity that takes place in your account, or it can also give you the ability to schedule a particular job known as a cron job that will trigger a Lambda function at a particular time. So it reacts to events and generates a script that is stored in S3. So what is the source of events? So you have various services that can send events to CloudWatch, or let me say so. From EC2, you have S3, CloudTrail, and also CloudTrail particularly means that all the API calls that are made in your AWS accounts are sent to, can send events to CloudWatch events. So basically, every activity on your account can be monitored, and you can go to CloudWatch and see the events. With the help of CloudTrail, the CloudWatch CloudTrail integration, you can see all the events that have taken place in your account, and so you can be able to troubleshoot or find a default or detect what has happened with a particular service. So from CloudWatch events, you can trigger, or you can cause different things to happen when an event has occurred. You can either trigger a compute service like Lambda or Batch, or you can use an integration service to send notifications like SNS or Kinesis. Or due to an event, you can even orchestrate a build using code build, or start your pipeline using code pipeline, or you can also trigger step functions. And with the help of, so CloudWatch events is what is known as the default event bus, which is on AWS. But we also have what we call partner event buses, which are software as a service tools that are outside your AWS environment. So they're able to also monitor activity of your applications outside the environment, and you can configure such that they communicate with the CloudWatch events, and you'll be able from your AWS environment to monitor your applications or services that are out of the environment. So an example of this partner event bus is something like Zendesk. And when you go to the CloudWatch events console, you see a list of partner event buses that you can use. So depending on what application you're working on out of AWS, you can always use a partner event bus to monitor and then communicate with CloudWatch, so you can monitor your external environments from within the AWS. And on CloudWatch events, you also have the option to archive your events. Like if there is a particular event that you want to archive, and then you troubleshoot or you debug, you can archive it, and then you later replay it to see if the particular bug that you were trying to work on has been fixed. Did someone say something? Okay. So in CloudWatch events, you can use resource-based policies to determine which resources from what accounts send events to CloudWatch events. And you can also use the event-rich content filtering to filter the rules that because basically CloudWatch events work on some particular rules. We define the rules for which it monitors, for which events are being sent to CloudWatch events. So you can use the content filter to filter the rules, maybe only events from a particular IP, events that have been activities that have been done by a particular IP should be sent to the CloudWatch events, or maybe any service with a particular suffix like S3. You can define, or maybe a particular number. So there is a wide range of filters that you can use to filter. Maybe you don't want to receive the events from every AWS service with the help of CloudTrail, as I mentioned before. You want just events from a particular service or application. So you can use the content filter to filter based on this these options. And then you have the the event bridge input transformation. It's a way of integrating event bridge and CloudWatch so that any event that is received on event bridge, you can also find it in CloudWatch. It's a really complicated process. I tried to follow the hands-on, but it was complicated a little bit, so I cannot really demonstrate it. Maybe anyone who is versed with this can help us demonstrate later or some other time. But you just go to set a rule on event bridge, and then depending on what the rule is, the service, the AWS service that the rule is monitoring, or the rule is defining events to come from, you can convert the normal code from event bridge to be able to interpret code in a way that CloudWatch logs is going to understand, and you can see your events from event bridge on CloudWatch logs. That's all I can say for this one. It was a tough one for me to grasp. Okay, there's also a service known as service quarters. To me, I didn't know that this service existed, and it's a really important service. So what does it do? So it tells you the quarters, all the quarters within your AWS account for different services, and it monitors the quarters for you. So it tells you if you're about to reach a quarter threshold. For example, you have Lambda concurrent executions, which we all know is 1,000 executions per account, and can go to service quarters and you see how far into that threshold you're reaching, and from there you can reach out to AWS support to increase your quota for a particular service or not. So basically, any service, you have from there you can monitor, you can check the quotas of all the services, all the AWS services in your account. And you can also set a CloudWatch alarm on the service quota. So for example, you can say, since the Lambda concurrent executions is 1,000, when the number of concurrent executions reach 900, for example, let a CloudWatch alarm be triggered so that you can then go to your service quota and you request an upgrade. So alternatively to service quota, you can use Trusted Advisor and CloudWatch alarms. It basically does the same thing, but the difference is that on Trusted Advisor, on AWS Trusted Advisor, you only have a maximum of approximately 50 services that you can check their quotas from Trusted Advisor. So service quotas is a better tool to use because it gives you all the services and you can check the quotas and threshold reach for all the services. So that is it about CloudWatch. If there is any question, I'll pause here a little bit. If there is any question on CloudWatch, maybe we'll bring it up and discuss before we move to CloudTrail.
So far, I'm good. Just shared instead something on composite alarms in the group. When I was going through this, I was went to AWS documentations because it was kind of a little bit abstract. Okay. So like to get some examples, and yeah, I found it interesting. The document I just sent, just like example expressions and how we use it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lydian. Any input from anyone? Okay, if not, then let's move ahead to CloudTrail. So this is also another service that helps you to monitor your accounts. So CloudTrail helps you to enable operational and risk auditing governance and compliance for your AWS accounts. What does it actually do? It logs all the events made in your console, your CLI, SDKs, and using APIs. So basically every activity that has been done in your accounts, that has been made in your account, CloudTrail logs all those events. It stores all those events. And the logs can either be sent to CloudWatch logs or to S3, where you can analyze them. So usually a trail is when you're creating a trail on the CloudTrail console, it applies to all regions. So it basically monitors all the activity in your account for every AWS region you work on. But you have the option to maybe specify a particular region. Maybe you want to monitor, you want to see the logs of all the activities of a particular region. In the case where you're working from different AWS offices, you can choose a single region for CloudTrail to log the events. And by default, CloudTrail keeps this information for 90 days. But if you want to keep it longer, you can send it to CloudWatch logs, or you can send it to S3, store it to Amazon S3, and analyze with the use of Athena. So what kind of events are logged in, or what kind of events does CloudTrail pick up? They have been actually put into 3 categories. You have management events. These are all operational events that modify any AWS service in your account. For example, maybe creating a role, creating a user, setting up any activity in CloudWatch logs. So CloudTrail captures all these events, and the events can either be read events or write events. Read events are events that the user does not have and cannot make any, the user doesn't make any modification on the service, probably just consumes data or information from the service. But write events are more critical because, for example, a write event on a DynamoDB table can involve deleting a table or deleting a column, which is more critical, and these events you would want to be more keen about. So you also have data events, which are very high volume operations. Like on an S3 bucket, you have events about deleting an object, deleting an object. You have what other activities? Basically object level activities. You have delete, you have putting an object, you have getting an object. Those are events that occur on a very regular basis. And for each object in S3, you can imagine the number of activities that go on just in an S3 service. And Lambda functions, you can imagine the number of times you execute a function. All those events are going to be captured by CloudTrail. And then you have CloudTrail inside events. So CloudTrail inside events are generated when the management events, means that events that modify anything on your AWS service, when they are being analyzed by CloudTrail Insights. So CloudTrail Insights is a feature of CloudTrail. It analyzes the management events and it detects any unusual activity based on a baseline. So it should have already monitored what normality looks like for your accounts, and then it continuously monitor and analyze every event that occur and every management event and detect unusual activity. And of course, when an unusual activity is detected as such, you can always configure thanks to CloudTrail CloudWatch integration for an alarm to be triggered also. So what are the things that CloudTrail Insights can detect? It can detect things like inaccurate resource provision, hitting service limits, You can have burst of an AWS IAM action or gaps in your periodic maintenance activity. All these are the things that Insights are going to notify you. It's going to notify you about. So as I already mentioned, you have CloudTrail and EventBridge or CloudWatch event integration, and you can use this to intercept any API call that is being placed on your AWS account. So when you integrate your CloudTrail and AWS events or EventBridge, CloudTrail will have the ability to trigger EventBridge, and as such, with the use of services like Lambda or SNS or SQS, you can either trigger a compute activity through Lambda or an action on any service through Lambda, or you can trigger for a notification to be sent to your account, and then you manually troubleshoot. So you also have the option to use CloudTrail when you're working with AWS organizations, and that's what is known here as CloudTrail organizational trails, where you have the logs of every activity that is occurring in all your accounts in your AWS organizations being aggregated to one destination, which you can define, and you can use that to monitor all your accounts. And you also have what is known as CloudTrail log file integrity validation. So basically, all the logs can be sent to S3, but now with this CloudTrail log file integrity, you're going to have another file which is known as a digest file, which contains the logs from all the other files in the past 1 hour. So what is the function of this digest file? The digest file is used like, I would say, a template to see if the logs from any log file has been modified. So once logs are sent to S3, they are stored. Maybe if logs from EC2 are sent and from RDS are sent to S3, you have maybe EC2 logs, RDS logs, but now you're going to have a digest file that contains the logs both from EC2 and RDS, which will stay the same. And if the log file from EC2 are tampered with, for example, you can be able to detect that using the template or using the digest file, which stays the same. So it's very good for compliance purposes. That is, if maybe someone has done some activity that is fugitive or is not right, and the person tries to delete the log from the file, you can use this digest file to be able to detect that, and it's good for compliance purposes too. But of course, you would have to, in order to be able to do your compliance activities very well, you have to enable versioning on your S3 bucket that stores these digest files and all the log files. You have to also use S3 policies and multi-factor authentication and object lock to increase the security of this bucket so that the log files cannot be tampered with by anyone. Okay, so that is it about CloudTrail. We are going to move to AWS Config. If anyone has any question about CloudTrail, they can ask before we go to Config. Okay. No question, let me continue then. So AWS Config is another service that helps with your compliance and auditing activities on AWS. So it continually assess, monitor, and record resource configurations and changes over time, in your account. So config, as the word sounds, is more concerned about the configurations of your AWS resources. So it notes the configuration at a baseline, and then it continuously monitors it and would notice and notify immediately there is a change in configuration, or maybe the configuration has overstayed its period or its durability. So an example of what config can detect is if there is unrestricted SSH access to security groups. Config can be able to detect that. If your bucket have public access, those are configurations that are important and can cause serious damages if they were done unintentionally. So config detects that. You also detect how your application load balancer configuration has changed over time. And it simplifies it simplifies generally, because config can monitor and access your change in configuration. It simplifies troubleshooting, operational troubleshooting activity, and it also simplifies change management, because since you have a service that monitors your configuration and you can be notified, you just know immediately when there is a change and your troubleshooting can be done. And of course, how we'll be notified is when you integrate config with SNS. So you've been sent a notification anytime there is a change in configuration and so on. And you can store config data in S3, of course, and analyze. So S3 is very handy when it comes to monitoring and auditing and compliance. Okay. So config also monitors and assesses based on some rules known as config rules. So these rules determine what actually config is going to be as config is going to be monitoring or trying to detect. As I mentioned, it is checking for the change in configuration over time. So there should be a base, and then from the basis you define the rules that it should check for. So you can either use AWS managed config rules, or you can custom your rules, and you can also configure or define if the rule should be triggered at when the rule should be triggered, or when the evaluation should take place. So it can either be for each config change or at regular time intervals. So you can determine if the rule should run or evaluate the resources at an interval of maybe every 1 hour or every 30 days, maybe if we're talking about S3 class changes and so on. So for config, there's no free tier. You have to pay for the resources of AWS Config, and it is $0.003 $3. So that is less than $1 per configuration item recorded per region. And per rule, you have to pay $0.001 per evaluation per region. So what config actually helps you to do is to check the compliance of your resources over time, the configuration of your resources over time, and CloudTrail API calls of a resource over time. So it checks all of that and is able to detect any configuration changes, and so on. So I'm trying to think of an example that config can detect. yeah, maybe when you're working with a SSL certificate, for example, and you know they're supposed to expire after some time, config, you can set up a rule to maybe send a notification when they are 30 days to their expiration date and so on. So you can go and renew the certificates. That's an example I can think of. Okay. So what then does config, AWS config do when it finds a non-compliant configuration? So config doesn't have any, as we already saw, it can send notifications for you to do some work, but it doesn't stop the resource configuration from being non-compliant. So it has nothing to do with trying to change the non-compliance of a resource, but you can have an SSM automation document to automate a remediation. So you can define on these documents, I think the document should be a code, what config should do, for example, if it finds a non-compliant resource. So you can either customize this document or you use the ones that AWS have provided for you. And on the documents, for example, you can ask config to invoke a Lambda function if it finds that a resource configuration is non-compliant. And maybe the Lambda function can trigger SNS to send you a notification, and then you then go and you renew your SSL certificate in that example also. And you can also use event bridge to trigger, so you can integrate config and event bridge and use it to trigger notifications still, so that you can be notified when there are non-compliant resources. And you also have a feature known as AWS Config aggregators, which will help you now to monitor the resource compliance from different AWS accounts, from multiple AWS accounts. But nevertheless, you cannot use it to maybe to deploy a rule to work for all these AWS accounts. So what this aggregator does is that it just aggregates the config data from the different accounts, and it sends them to an aggregator in the aggregator account, from where you can access all the data. But if you want a rule to apply to all these accounts at once, you have to use CloudFormation stack set to deploy a rule for config to all the accounts. So that is about it. So summarily, we've talked about CloudWatch, CloudTrail, and config. I tried to look for an analogy to differentiate these three services. It was kind of hard, but CloudWatch basically is performance monitoring. It's there for the performance. It checks the performance of your resources, your applications, everything that runs on your AWS environment. CloudTrail records all the API calls made within your account, and config records and record configuration changes. So I was thinking about maybe if you have a government building, for example, or a big house, maybe CloudWatch would be like the gate man, or the security guard at the door, who monitors the performance of everyone who walks in and out. And then CloudTrail will be his logbook, because those people usually have logbooks where you sign to say what activity you went in to do or so. But now I didn't find an analogy for config, and that is it from me. So that is it. If there is any question anyone can come up with. Before I saw some 2 questions I would like us to just tease our minds with.
Hi, Tatiana. Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very informative. So, my question is around did you say is CloudWatch log is encrypted by default?
Yes,
Okay.
all the logs, all the CloudWatch logs are encrypted by default, but now you can encrypted by default means it's using the AWS managed encryption, but you can decide to use can bring your own keys to use to encrypt your logs.
So if I get you right, if you are exporting the data from CloudWatch logs into maybe S3, you have to you then use the customer managed keys.
Since it is by default encrypted, means you're using AWS managed keys, and S3 is still on AWS, so you will not actually have to manually decrypt. But if you're using your if you're bringing your keys, then maybe if you're sending them to S3 and you want some other person to access those logs from S3, you should also give the person access to the keys to decrypt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you, okay, so which means that will apply to if you want to share your logs with another account. Can you? I don't think so.
Yes, I think so. Now, if you could, I don't think you. Well, I've not come across you sharing your logs with another account, but I know you can give access to another account, the S3 bucket where you've stored your logs. Right. So if you're giving access to another account, the access to the S3 bucket where you've stored your logs, I don't know, since it's still an AWS account, I don't think you have to be sharing keys, because actually AWS managed means you don't even have access to the keys, right? Except you're using the keys you bought by yourself.
Yeah,
The
I know.
AWS managed keys means you don't have access to the keys. You don't have anything to do with the keys.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but if you've decided to bring your own like customer managed keys and use them on AWS, means now you've taken control over the management. And if you're sharing the logs with anybody, you have to let them have access to the keys that you use to encrypt the logs. I don't know if I'm making sense to you.
Yeah, sure. Because I think I've read it in some other places, not particularly S3, that like EBS volumes. If you want to share your EBS volumes, or if you want to, you have to, probably if they are encrypted with AWS keys, you have to decrypt and encrypt them with customer managed keys before they will be able to.
Before you can share, yeah.
Yes, I think that it should apply to CloudWatch logs
CloudWatch
too as
logs.
well. So well, I didn't know you could use CloudTrail between accounts. I know when you enable for one region, it's enabled for all regions or something. So I didn't know you could use it for multiple accounts.
Yes, you can use it for multiple accounts using the CloudWatch organizational trails. The CloudTrail organizational trails. Per account, you can decide if it should capture the logs just for a single region, but by default, when you just create your AWS account, CloudTrail is enabled and it captures the logs for all the regions in your account. But you can decide for it to capture just the trail from just the activities from a particular region. That one now is just for a single account, but you also have the option of using CloudTrail organizational trails to capture the activities from several accounts. That makes sense, right? If not, it will be very difficult to work with AWS organizations where you're working with multiple accounts and you have a master account. You need to know the activities, excuse me, the activities that are occurring in every single account. So that's a good feature that AWS came up with. They always have answers to our problems.
It's customer centric.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe you can go on with your patients then.
Any other comments from anybody? I found so many questions, but let's just look at these two. Excuse me. So you have an application hosted on AWS, and it has the following requirements from an administrative perspective. One, you need to ensure notifications are sent when the read requests go beyond 1,000 requests per minute. You need to ensure notifications are sent when the latency goes beyond 10 seconds. And any API activity which calls for sensitive data should be monitored. Which of the following can be used to satisfy these requirements? So choose two answers from the options below. You have A, use CloudTrail to monitor the API activity. Use CloudWatch logs to monitor the API activity. Use CloudWatch metrics for the metrics that needs to be monitored as per the requirement, and set up an alarm activity to send out notifications when the metric reaches the set threshold limit. And D, use a custom log software to monitor the latency and read requests of the Elastic Load Balancer. So what do we think?
I'll go A, use CloudTrail to monitor the API activity. And let me see.
Okay. How did I input?
I'm still thinking. For the first option, I'm going to go for A because in the question, excuse me. In the question, the C part of want to monitor any API activity which calls for sensitive data should be monitored. So that's why I'm going for A. Now, still thinking about the second option. We have to give two answers, right? Yeah.
Yeah, two answers. Remember, you have limits up here, so we should be thinking about a service that helps you to customize notifications based on particular limits. Remember, I talked about CPU utilization, average. You can use some, minimum, maximum, or a particular number.
I'll go for B and C.
Okay. Any other person?
Yes.
I think I'll go for A and C.
Okay.
A and C also.
Okay.
Same
Who
thing
else?
here.
Yeah, so A and C wins. A and C is the answer. So we use CloudTrail for the C part as Lady N rightfully mentioned. We're using CloudTrail to monitor all the API activity. But now for the A and B parts that is talking about sending notifications, that is one thing we should take note about. And then talking about going beyond some particular limits. So you can use CloudWatch metrics. And remember, we talked about integration, CloudWatch metrics being able to trigger SNS. So that's why C is the answer for the A and B part. So we're using CloudWatch metrics for the metrics that need to be monitored as per requirements. So you can define, as I mentioned, if we're monitoring CPU utilization, for example, you can define that if your CPU utilization is, if the average utilization is 50%, for example, then a notification should be sent and you can come and then troubleshoot or come and you take action. So A and C.
I need to ask something.
Okay.
Why are we using CloudTrail? I thought CloudTrail was a monitor who did something.
Yes. And
but yeah, continue.
API.
the C part, look at C.
Yeah, but the C part is an API of the app, not API of somebody. They say it's an app that is hosted. So you are making API calls. So it's a app that is making API calls, not a human being. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Remember?
that app is hosted on your AWS account.
Yeah, I know it's open, but you're making a call to an app. Is the app that is making the calls, no? So that's why I'm like, CloudTrail is who is doing something.
Okay, but let me try to answer. I might not give a perfect answer. The app is making a call, but that app does not make a call by itself. The app is being run by someone, maybe from a particular IP address. You understand? So CloudTrail captures all of that information. Remember, I was talking about you being able to filter. Yeah, there was a CloudTrail content filter. You can filter the trails to send to your events depending on just from a particular IP, because you have a wide range of activities that CloudTrail captures. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't.
Wait, and also to add to that, with CloudTrail doesn't only track user activities, it also tracks API usage on AWS.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 When you say API usage, well, so for example, if I make an application that has an API, so I have a website, let's say an application that have API exposed, and somebody's making calls to this API. Let's say a website, a client is making calls to this API. Will CloudTrail log it?
Yes.
Yes.
You can see this, the second point here. It logs all events made in the console, CLI, SDK, and using APIs. So it logs all the events.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This is the second and last question. So a company is planning to run a number of admin-related scripts using the AWS Lambda service. There is a need to detect errors that occur while the scripts run. How can this be accomplished in the most effective manner? So you have used CloudWatch metrics and logs to watch for errors, use CloudTrails to monitor for errors, use Config service to monitor for errors, AWS Inspector service to monitor for errors. What is the answer? What do you guys think?
Okay.
Okay. Who thinks some other thing?
I'll go for A as well. I mean, by elimination,
Okay.
CloudTrail would not do that. Config, that's for something else. Inspector, we do not even look at it, even though that is a different topic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. CloudWatch. Let's forget about the metrics and logs. CloudWatch is about performance. So this is talking about detecting errors, of course. If there's an error, means the performance of your application or service is not up to point. So CloudWatch should be the one to do it.
But just a discussion on this. Could we add something like X-ray? Just let's just talk about. We have not done X-ray today. Could we add X-ray to this?
Well, I've not studied X-ray as a person. I don't know what it does. When you talk about X-ray like that, I'm just thinking about scanning applications.
No, actually, X-ray is used to monitor the latency from end to end of a request from point A to point B. So we cannot really use X-ray for this application.
Okay, all right. So you did mention about the event boss. We can use event boss. Please, can you go back there again?
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Oh, event bridge was already going somewhere else. Okay, here.
So you say we could use a partner.
Okay, yes. I think this will have been best to demonstrate on the console. So AWS Amazon Event Bridge is known as the default event bus. When you want to create a rule on Event Bridge, you have the option to choose partner event buses. So there is a partnership between AWS and those partners. I gave an example to be Zendesk. So those are software as a service tools. They are having a partnership with AWS. So from the console, you have the ability to choose which partner event bus should communicate with your default event bus, which is Event Bridge. So if maybe you're working on AWS environment and some other environment that is being monitored by Zendesk, for example, but you want to monitor the activity of your application in a different environment from your AWS environment, you can then use the partner event bus. So for when you're defining the rule, you state that, okay, the rule is going to be integrating your event. You're going to have notifications from the partner event bus to your AWS event bus, which is Event Bridge. So you can have notifications, or you can monitor external environment applications or applications in external environments from within your AWS environment.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Another interesting feature is that service quotas. Okay, account is open. I wanted if you could just open the service quotas console as well. Let's just see what it says.
Okay.
A new feature. What is it, a new feature?
I hope it is open indeed, because I might need to restart or relogin. Yeah, I thought as much. Just a moment.
No problem.
Yes, my benefits. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Here is the dashboard for service quota. So you see, for there's the difference between service quota and trusted advisor. For every AWS services, means that over the 200 services here, you can see for every service the quota that is allocated per account, and you can monitor to see how close to the threshold you are approaching, and from there you can request
Okay.
AWS to increase your quota. Let me click on Lambda, for example, and we want to look at concurrent executions, for example, or maybe any other thing that Lambda does. But let's go with concurrent executions. You see that per AWS account, you have 1,000 concurrent executions allocated per account, and but you can request a quota increase here. So utilization so far is 0 for me. So you can monitor your threshold, your quotas, and see. I don't know if EC2 has any quota. Okay, for auto scaling. So auto scaling per region, for example, the default quota, I don't know what it means, but the maximum number of auto scaling groups allowed for your AWS account. Okay, yeah, you see 500. So it actually defines what the quota is all about. So you can have a maximum of 500 auto scaling groups per account, but you can always request for an increase here.
And I had to request the response here is faster. It's easier here than maybe just manually doing it from elsewhere.
I have no idea, but since it's from within the AWS, yeah, I think so.
So that then in that auto scaling, I think yours is showing 0, meaning you haven't used it before. I don't know. Because we have done,
Means presently I have no auto scaling group running in my account.
so when you run and you stop, you come back to 0.
Let me go back there. Elastic Compute Cloud.
But I remember the lab we did, I think it's something on auto scale.
Yes, we might have done a lab. When they say the maximum, I'm trying to find it now. They said the maximum number of auto scaling groups per account means I think the maximum number of auto scaling groups that should be running at the same time per region. Titles, because presently I have no auto scaling group. I've not created any. I have not launched any application that is using an auto scaling group. Perhaps if I had one running, we might have seen utilization here to be 1. If I have 2, we might see utilization to be 2, and of course the quota would drop.
So that is my question. Why do we have to request for an increase? Meaning that your utilization is getting finished, right?
Yes, if
So,
the default quota is finished.
yeah. So how does it finish? Is it a consumption that is currently going, or when you use and you delete, it doesn't consume? That is where it consumes.
I would say is the consumption that is currently going in your what means the active auto scaling groups running in your account at the time, all at the same time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe if you are using your account to work deploy services for clients, for example, on a regular basis, you will not have up to 500 auto scaling groups running your account for no reason. But if this account is a business account and I'm working for clients, I might have different applications running from within here, and several of them running on top of an auto scaling group. So I might exhaust the quota. Okay.
Did you present on custom and default metrics?
I didn't get you.
Did you have something on custom and default metrics?
Oh yeah, to custom a metric, right? Yes, I think okay, yeah. To custom a metric, you use an API called put metric data. So this is the AWS documentation. You can read it through, but to do so, you are supposed to use a put metric data command, and then you specify the namespace. Let me go to my AWS account here. CloudWatch. So I actually did it. So you can see the various namespaces here. These are the default namespaces, the ones that AWS has defined for you, which is actually per application, but per service, sorry. But now you might have launched an application in your AWS environment, and you want to custom metrics that are specific to that application. So you'd want to custom a namespace. Maybe this namespace can be the name of the application you're running, and then inside the namespace you define the metrics that should be monitored. So to do that, you use this command as I was showing here. You use this command. There are a lot of things that you can specify, one of which is a namespace. You can specify the timestamp, the dimension, like what particular particular item of an instance, for example, should be monitored. No, sorry. How should the metrics be called with respect to an instance also? So there is an example here. So these are the various things that you can define when customizing a metric. There is an example here at the end of the page that you can try now and see. So you see, this is the command AWS CloudWatch put metric data -- metric name buffers. The name of the metric is the namespace. Okay, -- the metric name is buffers. So you've defined the metric name to be buffers. The namespace should be my namespace. The unit should be in bytes. The value, all of this. So we can use and you can use this to custom a namespace. Let's just try it and see. So I'll copy this command. Come to my AWS environment here. Okay. So let me just stay on metrics so that when we come back, we'll see. So I open Cloud Shell. And I paste the command. So we expect to see a namespace called my namespace, and maybe inside we'll see all these other details. Instance ID should be this and all of that. So enter. Okay, that is done. All right. Let's come back and see all metrics. Let me go to all metrics. All. Well, I was expecting to see a second one because I had done this yesterday. Okay, so this is a customs namespace called my namespace. Remember, we also defined the instance ID and instance type. Let's go to instance ID and see. This is the instance ID 1, 2, something, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can go back to Cloud Shell and see if that is what we specify. Oh, where is it now? Or maybe if not Cloud Shell, we go back to where we copied. You can see the instance ID 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's the same thing. The instance type is M1 small, just as we specified on the command, and the metric name is buffers. So anything, you can use this command and you vary the options and create a namespace that you want. Yeah.
It's a custom metric.
Sorry.
That is for custom metric.
Yes, to customize the metrics. Okay, I think another thing I wanted to show should have been this partner event boss. So go to events.
Another challenging thing is the difference between the custom and the default metrics.
Challenging in what sense, Terry? Sorry.
Just the type of metrics now, the CPU utilization and so on.
You, as I already as well, yeah, it's true. Maybe when you're working with it, but you can always define what metric, what should be monitored. Let's just look at this and we go. So this is our default event bus, which is Amazon event bridge. When you're creating a rule here, I think you have the option of choosing maybe the rule name. Let's just say testing rule. And then now select the event bus this rule applies to, either the default event bus or custom or partner event bus. You see, so here you have just the default event bus to choose. I think there should be somewhere. Let me go to the next step. Ooh. There should be somewhere. Okay, it's right here. So the event source. So in the first page, we chose the event bus it applies to. Maybe that is the event bus from which we are going to be monitoring. But now, where should the events come from? So here you can choose either AWS events or maybe event bridge partner events, and you can choose all of them and see that the event should come from all of those partner events. If you choose this one, you can take AWS events and then you
Okay, please, just go up a little bit, please. Enter my own. Okay.
your own events. This is when you've already defined maybe a namespace for your own using a custom sample event to test event patterns. Okay.
I see.
Your own events. Yes, I did come across this. It is when you custom your own applications or so. I can't really remember.
Your own events, like you will want to customize your own the way you want it, right?
Yeah.
No,
But there's a possibility to get events from your own. Enter my own.
no, if they are putting that space there where you have to input your code for maybe or something, so it means
Yeah.
probably you have to use that field.
Yeah.
Okay, go to the just remember, come to these sample events. Let's see the top events we have there. No, inside event bridge partners. Yes, come to this arrow. To the
Yes,
arrow.
from here you can.
Okay. Okay, I see.
Maybe since we are almost like 3 minutes past the top of the hour, maybe we can push this for Sunday.
Yeah.
And Thierry, you still have something to show us maybe after the Emmanuel presentation, because yeah, Thierry shows that things is wicked. So then Tatiana, you can now show us this.
Okay. No worries.
That was good.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
So you knew, are we having 2 presentations on Sunday?
No, wait, we have one presentation, that's Elvis' presentation. Then later on, Thierry is going to, his demo is quite short, right, Thierry?
No, I'm talking
Yeah.
about the catch-up session that we've missed.
Oh, no, it would be too much to have the one that I missed yesterday to have it this week Sunday. So it will be the other week Sunday.
Okay.
Because yes, Thierry, after this Emmanuel, Emmanuel Thierry presents it, can you also present hers? I think it's going to take like 30 minutes. I think it's okay for the week, but if it's for the week, then yeah, my presentation will be next week Sunday. I don't want to push other people's presentations, like have it like on Tuesday or Wednesday and cheap the date. So it's better to have it on a Sunday.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, that Kinya. I also thank you for the demo at the end, especially the questions as well. I did as well. Like it.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
attending.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tatiana.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you
Bye.
all. Bye.